The morning Martha called in sick was the morning everything changed, though I didn't know it at the time. I, Harold Whitman, 70 years old and supposedly losing my mind according to my loving family, was standing in my kitchen in Westchester County, staring at the coffee maker like it was some alien device. "Dad, you're doing it again," my daughter Rebecca said from the doorway, her voice carrying that particular tone of strained patience I'd been hearing more often lately. She was already dressed for her job at the law firm, her dark hair pulled back in that severe bun that made her look older than her 42 years. I let my shoulders slump and adopted the confused expression that had become second nature. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. The buttons are all different today." It was a lie, of course. I could operate that coffee maker in my sleep. Hell, I'd been making coffee every morning for 50 years, long before there were buttons and digital displays. But Rebecca didn't need to know that. Neither did my son Marcus, who appeared behind her with his phone already in his hand. "Morning, Dad," Marcus said, not looking up from his screen. At 38, my younger child had inherited his mother's sharp features but none of her warmth. "Rebecca, we need to talk about getting someone to stay with him during the day. Martha calling out like this proves he can't be left alone." They talked about me like I wasn't standing right there, like I was a piece of furniture that needed rearranging. "I can make my own coffee," I said quietly, adding just a hint of defensiveness to my voice. "I've been doing it for decades." Rebecca's expression softened in that practiced way of hers. "Of course you can, Dad, but sometimes you forget things, like yesterday when you left the stove on." That had been deliberate, too. A small gas burner left on low, no real danger but enough to worry them. I'd started these little episodes 3 months ago, right after I overheard Marcus on the phone with someone about Dad's valuable real estate portfolio and how they needed to move fast before he makes any stupid decisions. My Helen had been gone for 2 years now, and in that time, I'd watched my children transform from occasionally dutiful visitors to circling vultures. They thought I was too grief-stricken and old to notice the way they examined my mail, asked pointed questions about my finances, and exchanged meaningful looks when they thought I wasn't paying attention. So I decided to give them exactly what they seemed to be waiting for. "I'll figure something out for today," Rebecca said, pulling out her own phone. "Maybe Mrs. Chen from next door can check in." "I don't need checking in on," I protested, letting my voice crack just slightly. "I'm fine. Just a little tired, that's all." Marcus finally looked up from his phone. "Dad, you're not fine. Last week you called me 3 times asking what day it was. The week before you got lost coming back from the grocery store." Both incidents carefully orchestrated, of course. I'd even taken the long way home from ShopRite, timing my arrival perfectly to coincide with Marcus's usual evening visit. The look of smug satisfaction on his face when he rescued me had been illuminating. "Sometimes I get confused," I admitted, sinking into my kitchen chair with what I hoped looked like genuine frailty. "It's scary, kids. I don't like feeling this way." And there it was, the glance between them. Quick, but not quick enough for someone who'd spent 45 years as an aerospace engineer, designing systems that required attention to the smallest details. That glance said volumes. He's getting worse. This is good for our timeline. Rebecca sat down across from me, reaching across the table to pat my hand. "Dad, we love you. We just want to make sure you're safe and taken care of. Maybe it's time to think about adjustments to your living situation." "What kind of adjustments?" I asked, though I already knew where this conversation was heading. Marcus cleared his throat. "We've been looking at some really nice facilities. Places where you'd have professional care, activities, people your own age to socialize with. Facilities. Not homes, not residences. Facilities." "I don't want to leave my house," I said, and for once I didn't have to fake the emotion in my voice. This house held 53 years of memories with Helen. This was where we'd raised our children, where we'd planned our retirement, where I'd held her hand during her last days. "Dad, this house is too big for you now," Rebecca said gently, "and with your episodes getting more frequent." Episodes. That's what they called them now. Not mistakes or senior moments, but episodes, like I was having some kind of breakdown. "Just think about it," Marcus added. "We're not saying you have to decide today, but maybe we should start looking at options." I nodded slowly, letting them think I was considering their suggestion with the addled confusion of a man losing his grip on reality. Inside, my mind was sharp as ever, cataloging their words, their expressions, their increasing urgency. What I didn't know as I sat there playing the role of the deteriorating patriarch was that they'd already started gathering evidence, that Marcus had activated the video function on his phone during our entire conversation, that Rebecca had been taking notes on her phone about every confused moment I'd displayed. I didn't know that they'd been documenting my decline for weeks, building a case that would soon be presented to a judge as proof of my incompetence. I didn't know that while I thought I was testing them, they thought they were managing me. But I was about to find out just how far my loving children were willing to go to get what they wanted. As they gathered their things to leave for work, promising to figure something out for my supervision, I watched them go with the placid expression of a man whose mind was drifting away. Inside, I was planning my next move. Mrs. Chen arrived at 10:30, carrying a thermos of soup and wearing the expression of someone who'd been conscripted rather than invited. My next-door neighbor for 15 years, she'd watched Rebecca and Marcus grow up, had brought casseroles when Helen was sick, and now stood awkwardly in my foyer like she was visiting a stranger. "Harold, the children asked me to check on you today," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They're worried about you being alone." "That's very kind," I replied, shuffling toward the living room with deliberate slowness. "I was just going to watch some television. Would you like some tea?" "Oh, don't trouble yourself. I brought lunch for both of us." She held up a container. "Rebecca said you sometimes forget to eat." Another lie they'd invented. I'd never missed a meal in my life, but it fit their narrative of my decline. I settled into my recliner, the same one I'd sat in for 20 years, and reached for the remote control. Then I stopped, staring at it with manufactured confusion. "Mrs. Chen, I can't. The buttons look different today. Could you help me find the news?" She hurried over, taking the remote with gentle efficiency. "Of course, Harold. Channel 7, right? You always liked Channel 7 news." As she navigated through the channels, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Her phone was propped against her purse on the coffee table, and the screen was active. Not just on, recording. The little red dot in the corner was unmistakable to someone who'd helped design guidance systems for military satellites. They weren't just having me watched, they were having me filmed. I maintained my confused expression while my mind raced. How long had this been going on? How many helpful neighbors and caring friends had actually been gathering evidence against me? Every stumble, every moment of apparent confusion, every instance where I'd played the role of the declining widower, all of it potentially documented. "There we go," Mrs. Chen said, settling the remote back on my side table. "Is this volume comfortable for you?" "Perfect, thank you." I let my voice sound slightly tired, adding a small tremor that hadn't been there before today. If they wanted to document my decline, I'd give them something worth recording. Over the next hour, I performed beautifully. I asked Mrs. Chen the same question about her grandson twice. I got up to go to the bathroom and then stood in the hallway for a moment, looking genuinely lost. I even called her Helen once, then corrected myself with embarrassed confusion. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen. Sometimes I get mixed up. You remind me of my Helen when she was organizing things." Mrs. Chen's expression grew increasingly uncomfortable. She was a kind woman who'd probably agreed to this favor without understanding what she was really being asked to do. Now she was watching a man she'd known for 15 years, apparently losing his grip on reality, and it was clearly distressing her. but not distressing enough to stop recording. Around 2 o'clock, Rebecca called Mrs. Chen's phone. I could hear my daughter's voice through the speaker, professional and clipped. "How is he doing today?" Mrs. Chen glanced at me, then stepped into the kitchen for privacy. But my hearing was still sharp, and I caught fragments of the conversation. Confused about the remote. Asked me the same question twice. Called me Helen. Evidence. They were collecting evidence of my incompetence, and they were using people who cared about me to gather it. When Mrs. Chen returned, she looked troubled. "Harold, Rebecca is going to stop by after work. She wanted me to ask if you took your medications this morning." I hadn't taken any medications because I didn't need any, but that wasn't the point. The question itself, asked on camera, would establish that I required medication management. Another mark against my competency. "Medications," I repeated, letting confusion creep into my voice. Did I? I thought I did, but I touched my temple with a shaky hand. Sometimes I can't remember if I took them or just thought about taking them. Mrs. Chen made a note on her phone. Another piece of evidence, carefully catalogued. The afternoon dragged on with me performing cognitive decline while internally cataloging every detail of their surveillance operation. They weren't just planning to declare me incompetent. They were building a comprehensive case with video evidence, witness testimony, and documented incidents. Rebecca arrived at 5:30, letting herself in with her key. She kissed my cheek and thanked Mrs. Chen profusely for keeping Dad company. "How was your day, Dad?" she asked, settling onto the couch with her own phone conspicuously placed on the coffee table next to Mrs. Chen's. "Lovely." Mrs. Chen brought soup, and we watched the news. I paused, then looked confused. "Or was it yesterday we watched the news? Sometimes the days run together." Rebecca and Mrs. Chen exchanged a look that I was supposed to miss, but I caught it, just like I caught the slight nod Rebecca gave toward Mrs. Chen's phone. "Dad, Mrs. Chen mentioned you seemed a little confused about your medications today." "Was I?" I rubbed my forehead. "I take so many pills now. Sometimes I wonder if they're helping or making me more confused." "That's exactly why we're concerned," Rebecca said gently. "Medication management is serious business. If you accidentally take too much or forget to take them at all." She was planting seeds for the court case they were clearly planning. Establishing that I couldn't be trusted with my own medical care, my own daily routines, my own life. After Mrs. Chen left, Rebecca stayed for dinner, making sure to document every moment of apparent confusion. When I asked her to remind me which night was trash collection, something I'd known for 50 years, she carefully noted it in her phone. "Thursday nights, Dad. Same as it's always been." "Of course," I said, looking embarrassed. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. As she gathered her things to leave, Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. "Dad, I want you to know that everything we're doing is because we love you. We just want to make sure you're safe." I nodded, playing the grateful but confused father. "I know, sweetheart. I appreciate everything you and Marcus do for me." But as I watched her car pull out of the driveway, I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about moving me into a care facility anymore. They were building a legal case for guardianship, using sophisticated documentation methods that would stand up in court. They thought they were dealing with a confused old man who wouldn't notice their surveillance, wouldn't understand their strategy, wouldn't fight back. They were wrong about all three. The next morning, I called my old colleague Dr. Patricia Hensley at Mount Sinai, the neurologist who had evaluated me after Helen's death when the kids first suggested I might be struggling with grief-related cognitive issues. "Harold," Patricia's voice was warm through the phone. "How are you holding up? It's been, 18 months since I saw you?" "I'm doing well, Pat. Actually, that's why I'm calling. I need a favor, and it might sound unusual." I explained my situation carefully, leaving out the part about deliberately faking symptoms. Instead, I focused on my children's increasing concerns about my mental state and their push toward guardianship proceedings. "They're documenting everything," I told her, "every stumble, every moment of confusion. I'm worried they're building a case to have me declared incompetent." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Harold, are you experiencing any actual cognitive issues? Memory problems, confusion, difficulty with daily tasks?" "No," I said firmly. "My mind is as sharp as it was when we worked together on the Morrison case 5 years ago. But my children seem convinced I'm declining, and frankly, I'm concerned about their motives." "What kind of motives?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Financial ones. They've been very interested in my assets lately, and they keep pushing for me to simplify my living situation." Patricia sighed. "Unfortunately, that's not uncommon. Adult children sometimes mistake normal aging for dementia, especially when there's an inheritance involved." "Would you be willing to undergo a comprehensive neurological evaluation? Something more thorough than what we did after Helen passed?" "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd suggest. I can schedule you for a full battery of cognitive tests. If your children are planning legal action, having recent medical documentation of your competency would be invaluable. Can you come in Thursday morning?" After hanging up, I felt the first stirring of hope since this whole ordeal began. But I knew I needed more than just medical documentation. I needed to understand exactly what Rebecca and Marcus were planning. That afternoon, I decided to test the extent of their surveillance. I called Rebecca's office, making sure to sound slightly confused. "Rebecca, it's Dad. I'm sorry to bother you at work, but I can't remember." "Did we have plans for dinner tonight?" "No, Dad, we don't have plans tonight. Are you feeling all right? You sound confused." "I'm fine. Just sometimes I worry I'm forgetting things. Maybe I should write everything down." "That's actually a good idea, Dad. Would you like me to come over after work and help you set up a calendar system?" "Would you? That would be wonderful." Rebecca arrived at 6 with Marcus in tow, both carrying notepads and looking like they were attending a business meeting. They also both had their phones positioned strategically on my coffee table. "Dad, we thought it would be helpful to go through your weekly routine," Rebecca said, pulling out a legal pad. "Make sure you're not missing any important appointments or activities." For the next hour, they walked me through my schedule, documenting every response. When I mentioned my Thursday morning appointment, Marcus looked up sharply. "What appointment on Thursday?" "Doctor's appointment," I said vaguely. "Just a checkup?" "Which doctor?" Rebecca pressed. "Dr. Hensley. The brain doctor you sent me to after Mom died." Rebecca and Marcus exchanged a look that I was becoming very familiar with, concern mixed with calculation. "Dad, why are you seeing Dr. Hensley again?" Marcus asked carefully. I let confusion creep into my voice. "Didn't you suggest it?" I thought. "Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I thought one of you said I should get checked again." "We never said that," Rebecca said, making a note on her pad. "Oh." I rubbed my forehead. I must have gotten confused. Sometimes I think people told me things when maybe I just thought about them myself. Another note. Another piece of evidence for their case. After they left, I sat in my darkened living room, thinking through what I'd learned. They were definitely building a legal case, and they were being methodical about it. Every conversation was documented, every sign of confusion cataloged. But I was building my own case now. Dr. Hensley would provide medical evidence of my competency, and I was beginning to form a plan that would not only protect me from their scheme, but expose exactly what they were trying to do. The next morning, I made another call, this one to my attorney, James Morrison, who'd handled Helen's estate and my business affairs for 20 years. "Jim, I need to ask you something confidentially. If someone were trying to establish guardianship over me, what kind of evidence would they need?" Jim was quiet for a moment. "Harold, is this theoretical, or are you concerned about something specific?" "Specific? I believe my children are documenting my behavior to build a case for my incompetency." "Jesus, Harold, are you experiencing any cognitive issues?" "None whatsoever. but they seem to think I am, and they're very interested in gaining control of my finances. Come in tomorrow morning. We need to talk about protective measures you can take. And Harold, don't discuss this with Rebecca or Marcus until we've had a chance to strategize." As I hung up the phone, I realized that while my children thought they were playing chess, they'd actually started a war, and they'd made the mistake of underestimating their opponent. I was a man who'd spent 45 years designing systems that had to work perfectly under extreme pressure. Planning contingencies was second nature to me. Now, I was going to apply those skills to protecting everything I'd worked my entire life to build. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood as I sat in Dr. Hensley's waiting room at Mount Sinai. I'd told Rebecca I had a routine checkup, but she'd insisted on driving me, claiming she was worried about me getting lost on the subway. "I can wait for you, Dad," she offered as we checked in case you have questions about what the doctor says. "That's very thoughtful, sweetheart, but Dr. Hensley likes to speak privately with her patients first. You know how doctors are about confidentiality." Rebecca's smile tightened slightly. "Of course, I'll just grab coffee and be back in an hour." An hour wouldn't be nearly enough time for what Dr. Hensley had planned, but I didn't correct her. Dr. Patricia Hensley was a small woman with prematurely gray hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been one of the few colleagues who'd taken my suggestions seriously back when I was consulting on biomedical devices, treating me as an equal rather than just another engineer wandering into her medical domain. "Harold, thank you for coming in. I've been thinking about our phone conversation, and I have to admit, I'm concerned about what you described." She led me into her office, closing the door firmly behind us. "Before we start any testing, I need to ask you directly. Are you experiencing any actual cognitive symptoms? Memory loss, confusion, difficulty with familiar tasks?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Patricia, my mind is as clear as it was when we worked together on the cardiac monitoring project. I remember every conversation I've had with my children, every detail of their behavior, every instance they've claimed was evidence of my decline." She nodded slowly. "And you believe they're deliberately documenting normal aging behaviors to build a legal case?" "I know they are. Yesterday, my daughter insisted on coming to this appointment to help me understand what the doctor says. They've been filming me during what they call supervision visits. Every stumble, every moment where I ask them to repeat something, it's all being cataloged." Dr. Hensley leaned back in her chair, her expression troubled. "Harold, what I'm about to tell you stays between us until you decide otherwise. A week ago, Marcus called my office asking about your previous evaluation. He wanted to know if I'd seen any signs of cognitive decline during your grief counseling sessions." My stomach clenched. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. Patient confidentiality prevented me from discussing your case, but he was very persistent, asking about warning signs to watch for, how to document concerning behaviors, what kind of evidence would be needed for a competency hearing." The room felt suddenly cold. They weren't just building a case, they were researching how to build it properly. "Patricia, I need that comprehensive evaluation we discussed, and I need it documented thoroughly enough to stand up in court. We'll start today. I'm going to put you through a complete neuropsychological battery. Cognitive function, memory tests, executive reasoning, everything. It'll take about 3 hours." The testing was exhaustive. Dr. Hensley evaluated my memory, attention span, problem-solving abilities, and cognitive processing speed. I worked through puzzles, recalled word lists, solved mathematical problems, and demonstrated my ability to plan and execute complex tasks. 3 hours later, she reviewed the preliminary results with a satisfied expression. "Harold, your cognitive function is not only normal for your age, it's superior. Your working memory scores in the 95th percentile. Your executive function is excellent, and your processing speed, while slightly slower than it would have been 30 years ago, is still well within normal range." Will this be enough to counter their claims? More than enough. But Harold, I want to suggest something else. Your children are clearly escalating their documentation efforts. What if we turn the tables? What do you mean? What if you had your own documentation? I could arrange for periodic cognitive assessments, say, monthly for the next few months, to establish a clear pattern of maintained competency. And, if you're willing, we could document some of these interactions with your children. The idea was intriguing. How would that work? Audio recordings of conversations where they claim you're confused. Medical testimony about your actual cognitive state. If they're manipulating the narrative of your decline, we create an objective counter-narrative. As I left her office, my mind was already working through the possibilities. Rebecca was waiting in the lobby, scrolling through her phone with impatient efficiency. "How did it go, Dad?" Fine. Just routine tests. Dr. Hensley says I'm doing well for someone my age." "That's good to hear." But her expression suggested she wasn't entirely pleased by the news. "What kind of tests did she run?" "Oh, the usual. Memory, thinking, that sort of thing. Nothing to worry about." On the drive home, Rebecca peppered me with questions about the evaluation, clearly fishing for any information that might support their case. I answered vaguely, letting her think the tests had revealed the cognitive issues they were hoping to find. But inside, I was smiling. For the first time since this ordeal began, I had ammunition of my own, and I was just getting started. That evening, I called my attorney Jim Morrison from my bedroom, speaking quietly even though I was alone in the house. "Jim, I met with Dr. Hensley today. She confirmed what we suspected. My cognitive function is completely normal. Better than normal, actually." "That's excellent news, Harold. What's our next move?" "She suggested we document my interactions with Rebecca and Marcus. Create our own evidence trail showing their manipulation." Jim was quiet for a moment. "That's actually brilliant. If they're recording you to show decline, we record the same conversations to show your competence and their deception. Are you comfortable with that?" "More than comfortable. I want to catch them in the act." The next morning, I visited an electronics store in White Plains, far from my usual neighborhood. The young clerk helped me select a small digital recorder, the kind journalists use, barely larger than a matchbox. "It'll pick up conversation from about 10 feet away," he explained. "Battery life is 8 hours, and it's voice-activated, so it only records when people are talking." I tucked the device into my shirt pocket and practiced activating it discreetly. The tiny LED was barely visible unless you knew to look for it. That afternoon, Rebecca arrived for what she called a wellness check. I activated the recorder before opening the door. "Hi, Dad. How are you feeling today?" "Fine, sweetheart. Just fine." "You look a little tired. Are you sleeping well?" I wasn't tired at all, but I could see her phone positioned on the coffee table again. "Sometimes I wake up confused about where I am," I lied, watching her expression brighten with interest. "Confused how?" "Just, for a moment, I forget this is my house. I think I'm still living in the old apartment we had when you kids were small." Rebecca made a note on her phone. Another symptom for their collection. But this time, I was collecting evidence too. 3 days later, Marcus called to arrange what he termed a family discussion about Dad's future. They wanted to meet Sunday afternoon, both of them together to present their unified concerns about my welfare. I agreed readily, knowing this would be the perfect opportunity to record their real intentions. Sunday arrived with Rebecca and Marcus sitting across from me in my living room, both phones positioned strategically on the coffee table. I'd activated my recorder before they arrived, the tiny device hidden in my shirt pocket capturing every word. "Dad, we've been talking," Marcus began, "and we're really worried about you living alone. The incidents are getting more frequent." "What incidents?" I asked, genuinely curious about their fabricated timeline. Rebecca pulled out a notebook. "Last week you called me confused about your doctor's appointment. You couldn't remember taking your medications. You got disoriented in your own house." None of these things had happened the way she described, but I nodded along. "I suppose I have been having some difficult days. That's why we think it's time to seriously consider assisted living," Marcus said. "We found some excellent facilities that specialize in memory care." "Memory care?" I let my voice waver slightly. "Do you think I have what Mom had toward the end?" They exchanged that look again, the one that said their plan was working perfectly. "We don't know, Dad," Rebecca said gently, "but we think you should be evaluated by specialists, people who can help determine what kind of care you need." What they didn't know was that specialists had already evaluated me. And those specialists had found me completely competent, but my recorder was capturing their assumptions, their manipulative language, and most importantly, their eagerness to move me into memory care based on fabricated evidence. The trap was being set perfectly. 2 days after our family meeting, I discovered just how deep their deception ran. I was returning from a walk when I noticed Marcus's car parked down the street. Not in my driveway, but positioned where he could watch my house without being seen from my windows. I pretended not to notice him and went inside. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. "Dad, I was just driving by and thought I'd check on you." Marcus's smile was too bright, too casual. "How are you feeling today?" I activated my recorder and invited him in. "Fine, son. Just fine." "You look a little confused. Are you sure you're okay?" I wasn't confused at all, but I played along. "Well, I did have trouble finding my keys earlier. Spent 20 minutes looking for them before I realized they were in my pocket." Marcus's eyes lit up with interest. "That must have been frustrating. Do things like that happen often?" "More than I'd like to admit," I lied, watching him make a mental note. After he left, I called Dr. Hensley. "Patricia, they're escalating. Marcus was surveilling my house, then showed up pretending it was coincidental. They're not just documenting anymore. They're creating opportunities to document. Harold, I think it's time we involved someone else. Have you heard of elder law attorney Sarah Chen? She specializes in cases exactly like this. Adult children trying to exploit guardianship laws for financial gain." That afternoon, I met Sarah Chen in her downtown office. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, but her reputation preceded her. "Mr. Whitman, what you're describing is elder abuse, financial exploitation disguised as concern for your welfare. The fact that they're systematically documenting fabricated symptoms suggests they're preparing for emergency guardianship proceedings." "Emergency guardianship?" "They'll claim you're in immediate danger due to cognitive decline. Present their videos and documentation to a judge, and you could find yourself under court-appointed guardianship within days, with no opportunity to defend yourself." My blood ran cold. How soon could this happen? "If they file the paperwork tomorrow, you could be in guardianship by Friday." The game had just become deadly serious. "We need to file protective paperwork immediately," Sarah Chen said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. "I'm preparing an emergency motion to prevent any guardianship filing until you've had proper notice and representation." I sat in her office, my mind racing through 45 years of engineering problem solving. What else can we do? We need to get ahead of their narrative. Your medical evaluation, your recordings. We're going to present all of it to the court proactively. Show the judge exactly what your children are doing before they have a chance to present their fabricated evidence. That evening, Rebecca called to invite herself over for dinner the next day. Her voice carried an unusual urgency that made my skin crawl. "Actually, Dad, Marcus and I were thinking we should all have a serious conversation about your future. Maybe tomorrow evening." I agreed, knowing this was likely their final push before filing legal papers. After hanging up, I called Dr. Hensley. "Patricia, I need you to be available tomorrow. I think they're making their move." The next evening arrived with an air of inevitability. Rebecca and Marcus sat across from me again, but this time their demeanor was different. More formal, more determined. "Dad, we've made some difficult decisions," Marcus began. "We can't stand by and watch you deteriorate without taking action." Rebecca pulled out a folder thick with papers. "We've documented your episodes over the past few months. The confusion, the memory lapses, the unsafe behaviors. We have video evidence of incidents where you were clearly not capable of caring for yourself. My recorder captured every word. We've consulted with medical professionals," Marcus continued, "and they agree that you need supervised care immediately." "What kind of professionals?" I asked. "Dr. Williams from the Westchester Memory Center reviewed our documentation and agreed that you meet the criteria for cognitive impairment," Rebecca said. I had never met Dr. Williams. He had never examined me. But somehow, based solely on their fabricated videos and manufactured incidents, he had diagnosed me with cognitive impairment. "We're filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow morning," Marcus announced. "It's for your own safety, Dad." "Emergency guardianship?" I let my voice sound confused and frightened, which wasn't difficult given the circumstances. "It means Rebecca and I will make medical and financial decisions for you until you're stable," Marcus explained with practiced patience. As they laid out their timeline, the filing tomorrow, the court hearing early next week, my immediate relocation to a secure memory facility, I realized they had orchestrated this entire evening as their final documentation session. Their phones were recording my apparent confusion and fear as they delivered news of my impending loss of freedom. What they didn't know was that tomorrow morning, Sarah Chen would be filing her own emergency motion, and Dr. Hensley would be presenting medical testimony that would destroy their entire fabricated case. But as I watched their satisfied expressions, I realized something chilling. They genuinely believed they were saving me from myself. In their minds, they had become the heroes of this story. They had no idea they were about to become defendants. Friday morning, Westchester County Family Court, 9 a.m. Sharp. I sat beside Sarah Chen at the defendant's table, watching Rebecca and Marcus confer with their attorney across the room. They kept glancing at me with expressions of sympathetic concern, still playing their roles as devoted children protecting their declining father. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to my attorney Jim Morrison, called the emergency guardianship hearing to order. She was a stern woman in her 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We're here regarding the petition for emergency guardianship filed by Rebecca Whitman Davies and Marcus Whitman concerning their father, Harold Whitman," she announced. Rebecca's attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit, stood first. "Your Honor, my clients have documented clear evidence of Mr. Whitman's cognitive decline. We have video evidence of confusion, memory loss, and unsafe behaviors that put him at immediate risk." He presented their folder of fabricated incidents, their edited video clips, even a written statement from Dr. Williams attesting to my cognitive impairment based on their documentation. "Your Honor," the attorney continued, "Mr. Whitman is unable to manage his own affairs. His children are seeking emergency guardianship to protect him from making decisions that could endanger his health and financial security." Judge Morrison reviewed their materials with a furrowed brow. "These are serious concerns. Mr. Whitman, how do you respond to these allegations?" Sarah Chen stood. "Your Honor, we have significant evidence that contradicts every claim made by the petitioners." She handed the judge a thick folder containing Dr. Hensley's comprehensive cognitive evaluation, showing my superior mental function. "Furthermore, Your Honor, we have audio recordings that reveal the true nature of the petitioner's concerns." Sarah activated a small speaker and played the recording from Sunday's family meeting. The courtroom filled with Marcus and Rebecca's voices discussing memory care facilities and their eagerness to have me declared incompetent. Rebecca's face went white as her own words echoed through the courtroom. "We've been documenting his episodes. We think it's time for memory care specialists." "Your Honor," Sarah continued, "Mr. Shi Harold Whitman is a retired aerospace engineer with perfect cognitive function who suspected his children were attempting to exploit him financially. What you've heard is not evidence of his decline. It's evidence of their deception. I stood up slowly, letting my manufactured frailty drop away like a discarded costume. Your Honor, I've been testing my children for 3 months. Every confused episode was deliberate. Every memory lapse was performed. I wanted to see how far they would go to steal my independence and my assets. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Morrison stared at me, then at Rebecca and Marcus, whose faces had gone from sympathetic concern to shocked horror. Are you telling me, Mr. Whitman, that you've been deliberately deceiving your children? No, Your Honor. I'm telling you that I've been protecting myself from their deception. Judge Morrison leaned back in her chair, studying the faces before her with the intensity of someone who had seen too many family betrayals in her courtroom. Mr. Whitman, approach the bench. I walked forward with steady steps, my posture straight, my mind clear. Gone was any pretense of frailty or confusion. Sir, I need you to confirm, under oath, that you deliberately fabricated symptoms of cognitive decline to test your children's intentions. Yes, Your Honor. For 3 months, I performed episodes of confusion, memory loss, and disorientation. I left the stove on deliberately. I pretended to forget familiar tasks. I staged every incident they documented. And why did you do this? Because I overheard Marcus discussing my valuable real estate portfolio and their need to move fast before I made stupid decisions. I suspected they were more interested in my assets than my welfare, so I decided to test that theory. Judge Morrison turned to Rebecca and Marcus, who sat frozen in their seats. And you, too, documented these fabricated episodes without ever seeking independent medical evaluation. Rebecca's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she pushed him away. Your Honor, we genuinely believed Dad was declining. We were trying to protect him. By consulting with Dr. Williams, who never examined him. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Your Honor, Sarah Chen interjected, we'd like to present evidence of the financial motivation behind this guardianship petition. She handed the judge documents showing Rebecca and Marcus had already contacted real estate agents about selling my house, had researched my investment accounts, and had even obtained preliminary quotes for liquidating my assets. Judge Morrison's expression darkened as she reviewed the materials. Mr. and Ms. Whitman, you attempted to have your father declared incompetent based on fabricated evidence, consulted with medical professionals who never examined him, and began liquidating his assets before obtaining legal authority to do so. Marcus finally found his voice. Your Honor, we had no idea he was faking. The episodes seemed real. That's precisely the problem, the judge replied sharply. You assumed incompetence without proper medical evaluation. You documented behaviors without considering alternative explanations. And, most damning, you moved to control his finances before establishing any legal right to do so. She paused, letting her words sink in. Not only is this petition for emergency guardianship denied, but I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for investigation of attempted elder financial abuse. Additionally, I'm awarding Mr. Whitman triple damages for the emotional distress, legal costs, and attempted exploitation he has endured. The courtroom erupted. Rebecca burst into tears while Marcus sat stunned, his face ashen. Their attorney frantically shuffled papers, clearly unprepared for this reversal. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing either of you from contacting your father or approaching his residence without court supervision until this matter is fully resolved. As the gavel fell, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that had been there for longer than I'd realized. Not just the weight of their surveillance and manipulation, but the weight of wondering if the children I'd raised could really be capable of such calculated betrayal. Now I knew. And now they would face the consequences. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch overlooking the garden Helen had planted, sipping coffee from my favorite mug and reading the morning paper. The triple damages had been substantial, enough to ensure my financial security for the rest of my life, with plenty left over for my grandchildren's college funds. Rebecca and Marcus had each received 18 months probation and community service for attempted elder financial abuse. The restraining order remained in effect, though I'd heard through mutual friends that they were both in therapy, trying to understand how their concern had transformed into exploitation. My phone rang, breaking the peaceful morning quiet. "Grandpa Harold?" The voice was tentative, young. Marcus's daughter Emma, now 22 and in graduate school. "Emma, how wonderful to hear from you." I wanted to call and say, "I'm sorry." For what Dad and Aunt Rebecca tried to do, I had no idea until after the court case, but when I found out, I was horrified. "Thank you for saying that, sweetheart, but you have nothing to apologize for." I was wondering, could I come visit sometime? I know there's a restraining order against Dad, but I looked it up and it doesn't apply to me. I smiled, feeling something warm spread through my chest. "I would love that, Emma. Your grandmother Helen always said you had her spirit." After hanging up, I returned to my paper and my coffee, thinking about second chances and the difference between family by blood and family by choice. Rebecca and Marcus had made their choices. Emma was making hers. At 70 years old, I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst instincts, even when that someone is your own child. And sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is knowing when to stop pretending to be someone you're not. The morning was beautiful, my mind was sharp, and my future was my own. It was enough.